Hi everybody and good morning. Today we are going to cover topic 9.1.9, which is how air is cleaned before entering the lungs. So this is your learning objective, which is explain the role of goblet cells, ciliated cells, and mucus in protecting the gas exchange system from pathogens and particles. Just to clarify, pathogens are microorganisms that can cause diseases and are very harmful to your body. So what is our step to success today? Firstly, we need to explain the role of goblet cells. Secondly, to explain the role of ciliated cells. And thirdly, to explain how lungs are protected against harmful pathogens. So we're actually going to look into how the air outside is clean before it actually enters your lungs. So what is in the air that we actually breathe in? Harmful particles like viruses and bacteria and dust particles can be present in the air that you breathe in. And the fact that we want to breathe in air because we need the oxygen and we would breathe out carbon dioxide. And the air that we breathe in doesn't always mean that it's clean. And so we have structures in our respiratory system that helps us to clean the air. There are two main structures that you need to learn about that help to clean the air. And firstly, it's the ciliated cells. And secondly, we call them the goblet cells. And this is how we draw them simply in diagrams for O levels. Where can these structures be found? They actually line the trachea. So what we mean by lining is that, so this structure over here, so that's the pharynx, this is the trachea, which is the long tube that is right before, so it branches out, and then right before the air gets into the lungs, it has to pass through the trachea first. So this long tube right here. So at the lining, so inside the trachea, they are lined with the ciliated cells. So you can see over here, so that you can imagine the walls of the trachea looking somewhat like that. So firstly, we're going to cover the goblet cells. Goblet cells have the function to secrete mucus. I think you guys know what mucus is. In Malay, I think you usually refer them to as, like ingus, like that. And if it comes from your throat, you call it dahak, right? It's a greenish, yellowish color. Usually you would experience this when you are not very well. So mucus is basically a sticky fluid, and it is made up of protein. That's why protein is very important in your diet. It makes mucus as well. So we usually identify them looking like this. And this is what you can probably find in the microscope. So you can see that kind of shape right there, right? So that I think is referring to this shape right here. And that part right there, that the stuff that's coming out, that is mucus. So firstly, how do I remember or differentiate between goblet and ciliated cells later on? So if you guys know what goblets are basically something like this. It is like a cup that's wide at the top, and it is like kind of like very narrow at the bottom. So something similar to that. And how I remember this is if you've watched Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and you can see Dumbledore right there, you just hold in that part over there, and that is the Goblet of Fire. This is an amazing series. If you guys have time on the weekend, you should pretty much watch the Harry Potter series. And this is, so what the Goblet of Fire is you put your name in it, and if it accepts you, you can try to win the Trial Wizard tournament. I think that also looks pretty much like a goblet itself as well, but we're referring mainly to that. Okay. So this is just an extra bit for you guys to remember what goblets look like. Okay, so next is the function of the ciliated cells. The function of the goblet cells continued. So remember that goblet cells. So you can draw them in different ways, but mainly you know that So as looking at the picture of the goblets, they always have like the narrow bottom. So sometimes they draw it like a cup, sometimes they don't, but make sure that you can see that it's kind of like narrow at the bottom, and it is secreting something coming out right there, and that is mucus. So over here, if you look at that blue color, we're looking at the blue part is referring to the mucus, and you can see virus and bacteria being like trapped in there. That is the main function. So mucus helps to trap bacteria and dust particles when they pass through the trachea in the inhaled air. So now after you trap those bacteria, viruses, and dust particles, you want to move them away from your lungs. So we have the ciliated cells that actually do that for us. Ciliated cells have microscopic projections called cilia. So the part at the top right there, that is what we call cilia. I always mistake this. Cilia is spelled with a single L, not double L. And this is a SEM, scanning electron microscopy, and you can see, I have a feeling that I think that's mucus definitely, but you can see that this is definitely the cilia right there, the projections at the top, and these have actually the ability to move. So once the mucus is carried through your the mucus is actually helped and carried towards the throat, around next to, which is your pharynx, by the upward beating of cilia. So cilia itself can move, and once you have the mucus right there, they help to move it away from your lungs. So away from the lungs and to the pharynx, which is your throat. So what happens next is that once the mucus reaches your throat, the mucus that contains dust particles and bacteria is then swallowed, because at your throat, that now you can connect it to your digestive system. So the bacteria will then perish when they meet the stomach acid. So once your ciliated cells are the cilia of them are beating it upwards towards your throat, and then you finally swallow it, it now enters from the respiratory system, it enters your digestive system. So that mucus can then enter the stomach, and once it reaches a gastric juice that contains the hydrochloric acid, it will then be destroyed. All right, so these are your 3 steps to success, and pretty much we have finished our lesson today. So firstly, how do we explain the role of goblet cells? We just pretty much state that they secrete mucus, and mucus traps pathogens and dust particles. That's basically what they do. Secondly, explain the role of ciliated cells. So ciliated cells, what they do is that they have microscopic projections called cilia. Okay, let me just play this video. And cilia, what they do is they have this upward beating motion, and they remove mucus away from the lungs to the pharynx, your throat. And how do we protect the lungs from harmful pathogens is when the mucus is brought to the throat, the mucus is swallowed, and then finally the bacteria will perish inside the stomach acid. And that is all for today, folks, and I hope you guys have a good day. Bye, I'll see you guys next time.